and that just comes from feedback, customer feedback. But yeah, it's crazy where you go. But we've got Ben from Southern Highlands Brewing today. Ben's joined us, and after a brief conversation yesterday, we want to get into a couple of the issues that are facing the vertical, and certainly some of the issues caused by COVID, but also some of the ongoing governmental issues. Really keen to dig into that and find out a little bit more. So welcome, mate.
Oh, mate, great to be here.
Perfect. So, if you can give a little bit of an introduction as to who you are, how long you've been going for, and where the brewery's at the moment, that'd be brilliant.
Yeah, no, that's look, I'm one half of the ownership of Southern Highlands Brewing. I'm not the brewing bit. I'm probably more the finance and the business side, and I'm in business with a guy called Cameron James, the brewer, or as I call them, the arse sniffers. I'll tell you a story about that later. But I was sort of a civil engineer that ended up at PwC as a management consultant. That ended up in London and Dubai, more in a corporate finance capacity. But when I moved back to Australia in 2009, we moved to the Southern Highlands of New South Wales, which is sort of halfway between Sydney and Canberra. But it's a really, picturesque. It's like the Hamptons of New York, or the sort of the home counties of London. And so we bought a farm down here. But one of the things I always wanted to do is I wanted to do something. I thought it quite important that if we live in a regional area, we should do something, work in the regional, in that town. So
yep.
trying to find something to do in Southern Highlands back in 2010 was, it didn't have a lot of tertiary industry, which I was involved in. But anyway, so what I did everywhere I went around the world, I took my rugby boots with me, and when I hit Bowral as well, I joined the Bowral Blacks, and I started playing rugby down here. And in the centres with me was a guy called Cameron James, who I became good mates with. And Camo used to run a festival. He was a home brewer, avid home brewer for probably 20 years, and he used to run a December Beer Fest. And at the time, there were no craft breweries in the Southern Highlands. The scene was a lot younger than it was today. And so I said to Camo, after going to my second December Beer Fest and really enjoying the beers and the different flavours that he was generating just as a home brewer, and I said to him, "Listen, mate, I reckon what we should do, mate, we should get together. I'll fund it. Let's get together. Let's start a craft brewery." I thought I'd get this rapturous sort of interest. I got this, well, mate, if I had $1 for every time someone asked me that, I would have done it myself. I thought you cheeky twat. But anyway, so flippancy aside, we went into
you ungrateful bastard.
I thought, well, bugger you, So, and then anyway, so he calls me the next week. So I feel, 15 all. He said, "Mate, what about this brewery?" And I said, "Well, look, let's get together, put our heads together, and see what it might look like." And so we had this business plan. We sort of picked it up and put it down, and then I sort of sat there, I looked at it, and then we sort of toyed with it for about 2 years, and then I was actually approached by the rugby club to say, "Hey, Toombs, can you sponsor the rugby club and put some taps into the bar?" And I went, "Oh, look, it's a bit philanthropic, I think, because I was doing a bit of corporate finance stuff in Sydney." And then I said to the president, I said, "I tell you what, if I ever start a brewery, why don't, I'll determine what goes on those taps if I put them in." He goes, "Done." And so what ended up happening is we had our first tap deal without even having a brewery. But then I said, "No, look, I really got to the point where I wanted to do something in the Southern Highlands." I had a guy who was extremely passionate about beer, because over 2 years I could really see it sort of oozing from his pores about beer. And we could talk about beer all day long.
The beer or the passion?
The beer, trust me. And so we decided to do it, and going through the usual, DAs, and on the other point was we're looking around the Highlands for an appropriate venue, but we got 25 acres out at we got a little farm at Sutton Forest, and it had a 200 square metre barn on it. And one of the things, because I've sort of started some business around the world, was one of the things I never liked doing is overcapitalising and then chasing the capital. So I said, well, look, let's start it. Let's go into this incrementally. And so we started in 2016, and we in the 200 square metre barn at Sutton Forest, and we started brewing beer, and it was really, I loved it because it was something in the Southern Highlands with a guy who was very passionate about what his interest, which was a hobby at the time.
Yep.
And we were the first one down here, and the local interest we garnered by, because we're eponymously Southern Highlands, being Southern Highlands Brewing, we garnered a lot of interest from the local pubs, bottle shops, groups, schools. The list just went on, which really validated, what I saw as the first part of the journey that was Southern Highlands Brewing, which sort of, as I said, manifested itself in 2016, when we were badged up and ready to go, and that's sort of how a chance meeting on a rugby field ended up into a business getting beer out of one of my barns. So it was quite exciting, actually.
Yeah, all these. I find that all of the breweries that we've spoken to, and I probably talk to 5 a week anyway, just from we get inquiry and I talk to customers and that type of thing. And a lot of the breweries just kick off on this truly local train. So they'll start and they'll just focus on 5, 6, 7, 8 venues that are around them, that are locally, because a lot of them are in towns and that type of thing.
Yeah.
So you got a massive portion of them that are built, and then they just have a really local focus initially, and that allows them to expand into a they might maybe go into a larger municipality, then they might go into a larger a larger electoral district type of thing, and then it expands into the state, and then the country. But certainly the costs associated now with distributing interstate on top of your or other production costs are pretty crazy. And this podcast is as much a business podcast as anything else. So I'd be interested to understand from you so setting up a brewery in a home location in a barn. Run me through the challenges that you faced with that, and kind of all the things that you had to think about, because there'll be some brand new brewers from time to time that'll hear this podcast, and I'd love to for you to pass on a couple of those lessons.
Yeah, well, I think to one of your points, and that was our strategy as well. From starting in the Highlands, we wanted to radiate from the Highlands, and one of the things you need to do, and we sort of created a rod for our own back as well, because being Southern Highlands Brewing, you needed to own your own turf. And so if you can't penetrate your local market, what chance do you have, overseas? Not overseas, further afield. So that was a real key. That was a real key focus for us. But to the point whereby, to start up, the biggest impost we had was actually getting going, because I think when you look at the local council regulations that we had to go through, to ostensibly put some tin pots in a barn, which wasn't it wasn't CUB breweries by any means. It was small scale. Was probably the most frustrating part of the equation, and going through that compliance. And it might have been our particular council at the time, I thought was over bureaucratic. I thought that, so a piece of advice to new brewers was just, if you just think this is it's going to be bureaucratic and it's going to take a while, you'll just manage your expectations, and you won't get frustrated and impatient. So I think that was one of the things that I learned from that. And I think The second thing, we did it differently because we set up on a barn at our place as well. The last thing I wanted to do is the public coming into the venue. But what made it very apparent very quickly is you do need a retail premise. For a whole host of reasons. Firstly, commercial, because I think getting retail on your beer that you produce is the backbone of a business plan in the brewing industry. I think the other thing is you need a spiritual home. And so we quickly went in 2016 to starting production and fulfilling wholesale orders locally to building the tap house, which became our spiritual home. It got us retail on the beers, but it became also a bit of it became a shop front for a couple of other things. We wanted to make the experience tactile. We wanted to make it a little bit Southern Highlands. And so we changed our model a bit. And one of the things you'd say to brewers, if you're going to try and replicate another brewery, I think you're going to struggle. You need to put your own, you need to be, because we sat there and everyone, you look at Young Henrys who have done a fantastic job in the inner city of Sydney, and they've got this, they sort of, the hipster inner city. At the time I was the sort of a 44-year-old dad with 4 kids and no tattoos, and we live in the Southern Highlands
and no beard.
No, I didn't. I didn't. The too many greys had come through, so I didn't want to run that look. So what we decided to do is create the tap house in Moss Vale as our spiritual home. And it's in an old rustic building that used to be the first picture theatre in Moss Vale in the late 1800s, that then became a department store that morphed into it's a beautiful old sort of conservation building. And so we decorated it in a sort of the Art Deco style. We kept the sort of and then what we wanted to do is, rather than replicate the industrial, come in and see the vats and the fermenters experience, we decided to try and do it Southern Highlands style, where the product being craft beer, the logo of the brew is playful yet sophisticated in a sophisticated setting, where you could drink your craft beer, pair it with a brasserie style menu, and put another beer offering out there that might appeal to the locals, where the demographic was changing, but also we are a bit of a tourist hub, so we sort of get this traffic from Sydney and Canberra, and you can dine, you can sit on Bavarian Munich style tables, we've got a lounge, and so we tried to appeal to a very broad audience in what was probably a more rustic Art Deco ambience, and the product placing the people, making sure that they were sort of all aligned.
Yep.
And so really back to the question in terms of, from startup through to where we are now, it's the model we've pursued. And I think looking at, not getting frustrated, making sure that, I think you do need that retail premise, because that selling your own beer and getting the cash through the door very quickly really de-risks the brewery, which, as we know, sits in a very, very competitive environment.
Absolutely. You said before about having to market to a kind of a broader audience from Sydney and Canberra, for any of those consumers that are I guess are traveling to get there. And obviously, the market around you is only so big. Can you talk about the challenges of getting people there? Now, we know that every business, the only thing that matters up the very top is having customers that pay you money. So, and obviously you need to expand your market away from just the local district. So can you talk about the challenges and how difficult it was, or how easy it was from what you found to get those people to travel to you?
Yeah, well, look, one of the interesting, we've had a couple of, because we've had a couple of lockdowns and people from Sydney and Canberra couldn't travel to the Southern Highlands, you get really good visibility on what your local patronage is, and also where people are coming in, because the Southern Highlands is a tourist destination. It's a bit like the Adelaide Hills. If you're in South Australia, it's and so one of the key features is, because it's a renowned wine region as well, wine with the beer, because there's two breweries in the Southern Highlands now. That those guys are going to come when the environment's right. So one of the things I think where we had the ability to attract people was sort of the growing of the Southern Highlands, and there's been a big sort of diaspora out of Sydney. As Melbourne, everyone's moving to the countryside.
Massive.
The demographics changing, and what we found was people were looking for. We had a lot of people from Sydney coming down here looking for Sydney's things to do.
Yep.
And where the Highlands was, probably when I first got down here, was beautiful location, country town, but there wasn't a great variety of things to do. There was the wineries, but now we've got 2 breweries, boutique stores, and so it was really trying to ride that that change in customer focus for the people that were coming down to the Southern Highlands, and we slotted straight in there because it's we created a venue where people could come and cognizant that if I want to go out for a couple of beers, that I've also got my wife and 4 children are coming with me, so there has to be something for them as well.
Yep.
So whilst we're at the tap house and we've got our full range of core beers plus our seasonals, and we get invitational breweries in where all the people who are interested in beer do come to our venue, you can get a Chardonnay off tap, or a cocktail, or a children's meal, or you can park your dog out the front. So what we had to do is be, is in hospitality, is, I think you're quite familiar with, it's a marginal business in Australia. You've got to keep it quite broad. So we give no one an excuse. If you want to come for a beer but your wife doesn't drink beer, she can have a Chardonnay. Or if she wants to drink beer and the kids are here, we can look after them. So that's how we sort of looked at the initial part of the tap house in terms of our retail business.
Hospitality is hard enough. It's hard enough getting customers in a broad sense, let alone targeting one small part of the market that might account for it might be appealing to 20% of the population, when you can build something that is probably appealing to 80% of the population.
Yeah, you've got to be a broad church. And I think, and then, back to the hospitality bit, because my colleague who I used to work with in Dubai, who now lives in England, he owned pubs in England, and he said, he was looking for something. I said, why don't you start a brewery? You own pubs. Why don't you vertically integrate? And he has, and we just compare notes. And he's got a tap house in Portsmouth, and I've got the tap house here, and we always compare notes. And the biggest difference we have between our 2 business models is labour rates, and Australian labour rates. Some of the most expensive in the OECD. So
it's obscene. It's for. I came from 10 years of hospitality. The rates now in comparison to what they were, they were 10 years ago, or no, it's probably longer. When I finished up working hospitality, labour rates were still okay. You could get away with paying some people some cash and all that type of thing. Now the rates and the rates and the weekend rates and all the rest of it, they smash you.
Oh, the penalty rates, and that was the difference. They don't. A lot of these countries don't have penalty rates, and particularly Europe, which acknowledge that hospitality is an industry, and hospitality is at variance with the 9 to 5 working week. And one of my customers in Sydney, he's French, and we talk ad nauseum about this. You go, it's bizarre. And I remember when they were talking about penalty rates at one of the elections, and I think it might have been Bill Shorten saying, well, we should we should remunerate these people who are prepared not to have Easter with their families, and every time we come up with the public holiday shift, they are jumping over us to have the shift, and for very good reason. It's double.
Well, let's face it. I don't know how many businesses Bill Shorten's owned, but you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I guarantee if it was him paying weekend and holiday rates, he wouldn't be overly thrilled about them either.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, it's and so when you boil it back and you compare it to where it overseas, you know, you've got to do a lot of things right in hospitality. And like I said, is, you know, if you want to open a restaurant or hospitality, unless you're a husband and wife team or you vertically integrate, like you own the beer or you own the beef or something coming through, it's going to be really tough in Australia.
Yeah, you got to work in it. And
yep.
you got to work in it. There isn't enough money to have profit as well as having a management run business. There just isn't enough in it.
Yeah, and I think, and I suppose, and then you throw in a couple of pandemics. Yeah. And I was in Sydney yesterday, and the city is still it's still dead. You know, it's not where it has been, and a lot of people that have sort of based their business model on, you know, all things being equal. Well, I suppose in the last 2 years, nothing's been equal.
The city of Melbourne is fucked.
Is
like
it?
It is. So if you go into the CBD from Monday to Friday, it's 25% of what it was. I'm not even kidding. There's no one around, and there's inside all the cafes and stuff like that. There's very little foot traffic and all the rest of it. And you know, Hardware Lane is just demoralized from what it used to be. It used to be packed and, you know, bursting at the seams. Is now completely destroyed. So they've done a good job in that. But
yeah, I think Sydney, and I'm guessing if we had someone from Brisbane here as well, we might have the same conversation. And then you've got these commercial landlords that are probably needing return on investments, putting the squeeze down the way, which in fairness, because we had a local landlord during the pandemics, and we know him, he was just brilliant. You know, he rode with us in the sense he didn't accrue any, you know, hangover for the rent, which just meant
that's massive.
Yeah, it was nearly like because we're regional country and we all sort of know each other. I run him down the pub. It's, you know, we'll work through it, Ben. We'll get there. And, you know, I thought, good on you, Ross. It was a really good way. It just helped us immeasurably, really. And
that's the not having the hangover of a year's outstanding rent or whatever it might be, and then down the track a landlord calls on it. That to me is you know, I actually did a 5-minute video the other day where, you know, I just spoke about my thoughts about, you know, what because there's a really long hangover that is the extended negative effects of the whole COVID lockdown is hitting now with supply chain. The supply chain is really destroyed at the moment across a number of areas, not just local but international. Inflation is skyrocketing internationally now, and it'll hit here. I think it will hit here in a meaningful way. Probably it's not going to smash us like it has in the UK or the US. The UK is, I think, 7.5% now.
It's big now, isn't it?
Yeah. US is 8.5%. You know, and that doesn't even represent the true value of inflation either. It's
no.
So you know, you've got all these factors, and then you add to that the fact that the retailers and venues have to pay, you know, somehow come up with, if you've got, just say you've got a $2,000 a week rent, you've got to come up with an extra $2,000 a week because landlords want their money now. So
it's look, because one of our attitudes was, particularly in the wholesale business when it first started, you know, we were all in this together. So the first thing we did, we took this was the first lockdown. We took all the kegs back for two reasons. I sat there and thought, well, look, you're not going to sell them because you're closed, it's not fair for me to say, well, sorry guys. So we took them back, and then, because at least we knew if we took them back, we could look after them, we could refrigerate them. We're probably a little bit better to put them from keg to can. So we took that attitude. Look, we're all in this, because I was getting, we were getting benevolence from our landlord. So, we just tried to pass it down the line, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But we were quite shocked. The first lockdown was, it was quite bizarre, because everyone was in the same boat. We didn't know what to do, so we went takeaway, and we were nearly doing 60% of our revenue by going takeaway, opening 15 hours. And I thought, hey, this ain't too bad. Like, there's less moving parts. It's I could probably live with this. And the government was very generous in cash flow boosts and JobKeeper. I take my hat off to them. And so when we got to the second lockdown, we had some new staff, and they all got stressed. And I said, "Oh, don't worry, guys. Lockdowns, we can do lockdowns. They're great. We'll be fine." But there just wasn't the same money flushing about on the second one. It was to us, it was a tough. Whilst the first one was more uncertain, the second one was a tougher grind. It really was. It just didn't seem to have the money circulating in the economy.
Yeah, bottle shops and takeaway over that first one skyrocketed, and we saw it in our numbers. The hospitality obviously fell off a cliff, and then the sales to bottle shops were up by 40%.
Yeah,
so it just showed the increase. Yeah,
but it was anyway. I don't want to call it or put the kiss of death on it, but we just had Easter, and we've just seemed to have. I tentatively say, things are kicking back into gear in the Southern Highlands.
It's good to hear.
Yeah, I say that with trepidation, though. So I just
no, that's good. It's it's good to feel like it's feel like it's behind you. I think where you guys probably have a bit of benefit over some of the inner city breweries is probably a population had to have increased up there. It's decreased in the city, and then it'd be interesting to see the demographic of the population that has shifted and moved. I dare say it's probably 25 to 40-year-old professional types, is it? Or
yeah, well, it's good, because we've got a really good barometer at school, because we've got kids at school down here, and just the 87 new children with all the new faces is sort of a testament to where they've come from. And they've come from Sydney. They've essentially got out, and there's you have a population of 50,000 people in the Southern Highlands. There's numbers going about that 12 to 15,000 have moved since the pandemic, where a lot of them, I think, that used to have a house in the Southern Highlands have said, well, right, that's home now. Sydney's the bolt hole. So because we said, well, where do we put them? But I think they've just absorbed down here, and the local economy and it has changed. And so I think, we're a beneficiary as, I suppose most regional areas in Australia, it seemed to be following the same trend. Yeah.
That kind of brings me to my next question, and that's around some of the issues that you're finding as a general industry. I mean, obviously we've got a number of I guess organizations that can lobby on behalf of the brewery sector. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on what's going on in the vertical at the moment, and kind of the separation between a craft or independent brewer and the larger commercial ones.
Yeah, well, I think there's been really good structural change in the industry, which you can put down to the excise relief that came in at the last budget that executed on the 1st of July, which has really changed the environment for smaller brewers like us. We're probably at the scale of, we run a 20 hex system, so we're probably one of the bigger, smaller breweries, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And having excise relief from when we started from $30,000 going to $100,000 to now having $300,000 of our excise fully remitted has really changed the environment for the smaller brewers. It's really given us, it's reshaped our business model to the point where, I looked at the business plan and you couldn't predict this was going to happen. But now, instead of needing, to break even at sort of, up to sort of 1 million litres, there's a really niche business model now that's really focused us into looking at, hang on, you can really make some money here. At the lower levels, and instead of having to bang out 1 million litres and keep going for that increment and grow just to be profitable, which was going to sink a lot of these these smaller breweries, that excise relief has been fantastic. And so
and sorry just to chime in, those lower levels, that's where they also need the cash flow relief. And obviously excise, you got to pay it. You have to pay it yesterday.
Well, and in beer, you got, you're paying it up front, and you got 60% of it remitted. But you were sort of, the balance sheets aren't the same as the Japanese multinationals, but you're nearly like on a like for like in terms of a tax liability and paying it in advance before you sell it, unlike the wine industry. Was we sort of sat there, and the Independent Brewers Association did a fantastic job lobbying over many years to get it to that point. So in terms of that issue in the industry, that's been a real boon for the industry, I think, and it's really reshaped how we look at our business and our business plan now. And, back to the point on, shipping liquids really expensive. We've got a really, sharp focus now. We're in the Southern Highlands. We have 30% of the population of Australia within sort of less than 2 hours drive of us: Sydney, Canberra, Wollongong, Newcastle. We've got a really focused business plan on that market. I'm not jumping to go to Victoria. With these visions of national distribution, I've really got to this point where I can be a smaller, profitable niche brewery, notwithstanding the fact that we were sending beer to Hong Kong, which hit me from left field. So in terms of the environment we sit in now with that tax change, because the cost of a beer, the biggest cost on producing beer in Australia for us was tax, and it shouldn't be that. That shouldn't be the biggest cost. Exactly, and it just seems so counterintuitive to promotion of local business, and so that was an excellent result in what is, which I see one of the biggest issues in the industry now is essentially the duopoly that we've got between, Kirin and Asahi, or, Lion and Carlton United, where they control 94% of beer sales in Australia, where, a lot of people look at, the craft beer market in Australia, it's saturated. There's 700 odd of us competing, in this market, but we're only competing for 6% of the market. And I think the real issue sits there. What if that was 10% or 15%? Would the craft beer industry in Australia be saturated? I don't know. But the thing that worried me was most Australians still think VB and 4X are good Aussie beers. They're not. They're Japanese owned. And then I went to Dubbo one day and I was walking, there was an old fella and he sat there and he said, this you fancy stuff. And I said, what do you drink? And he goes, mate, I drink VB. I said, it's owned by the Japanese now. No. And I said, it's Australian. I said, no, it's not. And so to me, but there's such an inertia with publicans in terms of buying Australian, supporting local. We all hear the messages. When you speak to a publican, it's white noise. Because the way Carlton and Lion tie these guys up, there's a real inertia to move. And when you start talking about, well, you should be supporting local, and it gets really awkward for them, because I know how some of these deals are structured, and it makes sense. Look, money talks. I get a new cool room. I get my rebates up in front. There's a whole heap of money there. I give them a cap and a T-shirt. They're flying him to Las Vegas. Like it's just a point where that 6%. How can we make that 6% 10%. And then are we in a saturated market in the craft beer industry? I don't know.
How do you compete though? So that's the, I think obviously being owned internationally, that takes a lot away. You do have, obviously, the positives is that you still get Australian employment, to actually produce and distribute. But obviously, where all the cash goes after that is not onto our shores. So my question is, how do you compete with such size and scale and all the rest of it? Is it a shift that has to come from the pubs? Do they have to make a concerted effort to kind of give you guys a go? And what's the incentive to do that?
Yeah, well, there's at the moment there's probably not, because the deals that come across. I mean, I'll give you a little example. I was talking to a pub group, and I was talking about beer and getting beer on, and I was quite relatively close to them in a sense. And their first response was, well, how can you compete on price against the big guys? And I said, well, guys, you haven't even asked me how much I'm going to sell it to you for. And that to me summed up the inertia that sits with these guys.
Yeah, they don't even want to know. Yeah.
They don't want to know. They don't want to know. Now, there's probably a whole host of reasons for that. One of them would be, the bigger the group is, the more lucrative they will be. And I think with that excise relief that we got, we possibly can compete on price. I know how they work. They might sell a keg for $300. You might get $1 rebate. The keg nets out at $250. That's sort of something whereby, on face value, our craft beer is probably cheaper than the big guys' craft beer. But the problem is the rebate going back to head office that the publican doesn't see. That could be the carrot. So
if they're a broader group, you're saying,
if they're a broader group, and then look, and that's the nature of the beast. The ACCC looked into it a couple of years ago, and it was, it was deemed okay. And look, they've got, there's certain restrictions there that they have to make taps available, but we are still scrapping over 6%. So you sit there and say, well, how do we compete? How do we change? And to me, the education of the customer drives the publican to change, because we always say, what beer should we put on tap then? And I said, well, look, I'd start with this, but I'm not going to preempt anything, because your customer's going to tell you what sells. So if we put 3 beers on, what's selling? We're going for twice as much as that. So your customer will tell you. If the Australian public had a little bit more awareness on where their actual beer came from, buy local, get into it, the customer will tell the publican what they want.
It'd be interesting if the authorities did a massive survey, just asking people questions and slotting in a couple of those questions around is VB Australian owned? Is Australian owned? And actually just surveyed the population to find out. Be interesting.
Yeah, well, we tried on our social media. I tried to rattle the cage a bit and sort of put on social media, and they had the top 10 selling beers in Australia and the origin of them. And it was the least responded response we've ever had on our social media. Like, I didn't get a wow, or, it just seems to be an accept. And I suppose, so the challenge for the industry is, and the IBA has been great. We've got this certified independent seal, which it tells you where your beer's coming from, and you're supporting Australian. And obviously, if you buy certain beers, you're supporting local. But it is a marketing and an awareness campaign, and it's expensive. So it's a journey I think we need to take to see, if we can get the independent brewers from 6% to 10%, what does the industry look like then? So to me, you might not be talking about saturation. You might not see some of the breweries, that go into it that possibly might fail, might continue. And then, all of a sudden, it's more jobs, more economy in this industry called, independent brewers, which the government really acknowledges now. Because I think if you look at the figures, and I don't have them off the top of my head in terms of turnover, employment, direct and indirect, it's a very compelling industry these days.
I mean, for government, if you look at the employment per litre of beer produced, that'd be a metric that you'd be looking at. The ratio will be much higher in craft, obviously, because there's less automation, all the rest of it. So, which is, you know, more jobs at the end of the day. Sure, it's more cost for the employer, but it's more jobs, you know. So government should be looking on that very favourably.
Yeah, and look, you know, look, I take my hat off to the government. Yeah, I just think, because they sat there and they said, look, we've got this excise relief and we want you to do two things. You know, we want more money to come into the smaller breweries, so you can do two things. You can buy more equipment and you can employ people. And since July, Southern Highlands Brewing has bought more kit and put on a trainee brewer. So we did exactly what it said on the tin. And I think that's been given us real tailwinds, but we still sit in this market where it's a duopoly. And it's, yeah, the funny stories you hear where the most popular beer has to be put off tap because one of the big guys isn't getting his volumes because he paid the rebates up front. Like you're sitting there going, well, it's just counterintuitive, I think. But it's, you know, pubs have, you know, they've been hammered. So, you know, it's probably not the right time.
Yeah, pretty hard to apply pressure at the moment.
I get it, but just from our point of view and the way I see it, and I get pretty frustrated when you have a guy come on the news saying, well, if the government just halve the excise on beer, what'll end up happening is the publicans will get more money. We can offer cheaper schooners, and it all rolls around. And I was sitting there saying, well, hang on, they've given us great excise relief, just not to the duopoly. And I guarantee if the duopoly got it, how much would the publican receive, and how much would end up in Japan? Yeah. So
and how hard is it to compete for independence? Pricing would be it'd be a race to the bottom.
Yeah, it would be. And listen, yeah, I'm quite emotive over it, just because it just, to me, it seems that the message that we've all become a little bit more introspective, you know, supply chains are disrupted. We can do more. Let's support local, you know, and you see those wonderful signs that, you know, come and have a drink or eat here and you pay my children's school fees versus heading back to. So it's about building that, but it gets to this point where in certain sectors it becomes very inconvenient. Oh yeah, buy local, buy I don't know. You know, I've got this good deal with Carlton over here, and anyway, so that's probably my bugbear in the industry, I guess. And if we don't rattle the cage, it won't change.
Yeah, I think that seems like the most logical next step is to you make a very good point. You shift the 6% to 8% and see what it does, and then you shift the 8% to 10%, and you know how you go about that. You know, I'm not an expert in brewing. I'm a software person. So that's probably for someone else to solve. But
smarter people than us, Tim.
Hardly.
But yeah, like I think if you take that point, if you take us, you know, if we went to 8%, that's increasing the industry by 33%. That'd be huge.
Yeah,
that would be huge. And I think the investment, you could extrapolate the numbers. I think that'd be a real kick for the industry.
Do you know the increase in say the last 5 years of the overall beer sold in Australia? Has it been kind of 4% to 6% type of thing, or has it been pretty stagnant? Or
I think beer sales in general, you've got to break it down. Beer sales in general have declined. People are drinking less, which paradoxically gave birth to craft beer, because if you're going to drink less, we're not in the days of our fathers where, you know, 16 styles of lager, KB through to this, get a slab, make it benign and drink as much as you can. And that was the business model. So you market very easy drinking beers. People don't drink as much anymore, so they're more discerning. So they want to taste beer. So whilst beer sales in general are reducing, the craft beer component is increasing.
Yep.
And the numbers escape me. But in terms of trends, that's how it's happening. And that's why you see a lot of these acquisitions, because major beer companies are losing out to the crafties. And so what ends up happening is you buy the crafty, you maintain the market share. And that, to me, it's been probably driven by the metrics and the measurements of these big guys, because they're losing the market share to us.
Do you think this is probably the last question I've got for you. Do you think that the acquisition path for some of these groups will start to slow down a bit? I think that you've got some of the smaller groups that have bought 4 or 5 or 6 distilleries and breweries. Your Mighty Crafts and
actually, I was really
Gage Roads and Good Drinks and those type of groups, and they're obviously going for economies of scale and trying to centralize some of their administration and all that type of thing, I would imagine, whilst keeping the core crew pretty much the same at each site. I'd imagine that's probably where they're looking for some of that benefit, is in the operational administration area. So that makes sense. And then, but it seems like the purchasing, also the acquisition from some of the big guys may have started to slow down a bit.
Yeah, I think those days might be done. I think there's what fits their blueprint, I guess. There's only a few remaining independent brewers of that scale that makes sense for those guys. And I think initially they made acquisitions based on market share. I think they were a little bit more savvy. I think the deal they did with Fermentum was an earnings one, because that was a really solid, if you just look at it as a business, solid and profitable, well run. Put them in the stable, they'd be great. But I'm guessing now it's going to run out of puff, and there's sort of like this next stratum of acquisitions, because the Mighty Craft one really interested me, to the point, the business model that I bought shares in it. So I thought, well,
okay, awesome.
Yeah. I just it floated. I left it alone for a while. Had a look at the business model. I thought, hey, this is good. And look, at the moment, it seems like it's work in progress, but it's heading in the right direction. Particularly with, look, the last 6, I think that, you get the information is publicly available, but it's last 6 months, results are out. It's really hard because everyone had a hard 6 months. So I think that's a really interesting concept. And I think a lot of these companies, even Lion and Carlton now, they're beverage companies. They're not beer companies.
Mm-hmm.
Mighty Craft is a beverage company, because you can't ignore your seltzers, your craft spirits. So I think, but the way Mighty Craft, and I guess Tribe's in that boat as well, buying at the smaller level seems to be the trend. And it seems to be heading in the right direction without being proven yet, in my mind, from what I know and see.
It makes a lot of sense if you've got salespeople out there, because with in the vertical, you've still got the problem. Well, not a problem, but you still got the requirement to have salespeople on the road selling your beer. So certainly from a wholesale perspective, so you kind of need salespeople anyway. If those salespeople can sell 4, 5, 6 products as opposed to 1, 2 products, then that to me is a massive benefit that some of those groups might see.
Yeah, hugely. It just makes sense. It just makes sense. And I think, and then you have the ability to put something out like Better Beer as a group. Yeah, there's a lot of harmonization of corporate overheads. There's a lot of collective marketing. That's why I had a really good look at it and thought, I'll buy some shares. I look at the model resonates, and I suppose we just need to see it roll out now. And as I said, it seems to be heading in the right direction.
Yeah, it'll just be time.
Yeah. Because they've sort of pioneered it a bit.
Time and execution. The two big things.
Execute. Time's the other thing, and it's like some people, you just can't get frustrated in these businesses. You've got to, because there's a couple of things that you can get the business model right. But then, if you sit in the environment we've had in the last 2 years, it's because we've sort of been at the inflection point in the business to sort of, because our marketing now is we're Sydney focused, we're Newcastle, Canberra focused. So we've got a home here now, and
established locally, and now
but then that's it. Like I've done we were shipping beer to Hong Kong. Whilst it was nice for the ego, it just didn't make sense. And because we had the kangaroo on the can, it resonated in Hong Kong. It was fantastic. And so now, Sydney, we just picked up sponsorship of Sydney University Rugby, which is one of the sort of oldest rugby club in Australia type. So that we've got a real set plan where we're sort of stepping to next anyway.
No, that's great, mate. That was we've just done an hour, and that's gone. That's flown by. That's flown by. Mate, thanks so much for your time. That was a really, really good chat. I really enjoyed it. It was great.
Oh, Tim, thanks, mate. Well done for putting this forum out here, because I've really enjoyed the podcast I've listened to, and actually, it's great to get different perspectives from different people, and this is bringing it together.
Awesome, mate. Thanks so much.